Hi, Ali, and welcome to the Natural Birth Podcast. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks so much for having me.
Such a pleasure to have you on. I love hearing stories from mamas who've gone from having a cesarean to then having her VBAC, and for you, also then having a home birth after a VBAC after cesarean. So, I think there's so much wisdom in everything that you will share, how, your journey went from that first birth to your third. We're going to dive on deeper into the third, obviously at home. But before that, let's dive on into a little bit of the wisdom that came out of, having your first baby be a cesarean and then also your VBAC. What did you learn that made you in the end then finally come to wanting to have that home birth?
Yeah. So I would say, first off, I learned how to come out of fear and victim mode. I don't think I realized how powerful fear can be and how much we play the victim in our own lives in so many situations, and we give our power away. And
Mm-hmm.
that's not to judge anyone because I've been there several times, but I realized after I was able to really almost become like the observer of my life over the last few years and start to really kind of unpack and unwind and heal and go all through all these things that, like, wow, fear is what truly holds us. It really moves us from a place of being empowered and excited and, enjoy to like just this like frozen space. And, long story short, without getting into my C-section, I was very much in fear from family, friends, everyone around me, media, et cetera, et cetera. In my mind, I knew I wanted to have a natural birth. I knew I wanted to have a completely natural, not in a hospital. But everyone around me told me that that was wrong, told me that that was crazy. I mean, the list goes on. And I was a new mom, right? I was a brand new mom. I didn't want to hurt myself. I didn't want to hurt my baby. I didn't, I didn't know what to do. And so I immediately moved from the space of like, I feel like my intuition knew, but I kicked it off immediately. And I listened to that and I played the victim and I went,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I'll switch from the midwife I found and I'll just get a doctor and I'll just do all the things. I'll please everybody. That's nothing. I am a recovering people pleaser. For
Mm-hmm.
anyone who is also a people pleaser, that is also victim mode. It's another program we get into.
Oh, yes.
And I was a part of all of that. And, I think that when that was all happening, I was so convinced I was doing all the right things because making everybody else happy. But I didn't realize that I wasn't happy. I was sacrificing all of what I had originally felt and what felt good to me. And I believe that added on to, just the trauma of my birth, everything I had gone through, switching providers last minute because my intuition kicked back in and was like, no, 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 I don't want this. And it was like at the end of my pregnancy, my regular doctor had left and there was just all this stuff happening. And to me, it was all these, red flags happening, but I kept ignoring them. So many times I think, especially as mothers, we shove our intuition down. We let an expert tell us, or we let someone, make us feel like a victim. Like, no, 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 you don't know. You're not smart enough, or there's no way you could know that. But let me tell you something. Yes, you do. And it took me to have, my third child to realize, yes, you do. Your body tells you, you feel everything in you, you. Only you know you and your children or child best because they like literally lived inside of you. You heard and felt their heartbeat. Like they've been a part of you, that you are, in my opinion, the spiritual vortex, if you will. You are the portal from
Mm-hmm.
God, source, universe, divine to come into this world. How
Mm-hmm.
could you not have
Mm-hmm.
all the wisdom within you? How could you not have all the answers, all the codes, everything? But we shut that all off because this world tells us, no, you don't know. No, I know better. I'm an expert. So that was the first thing I learned was like, wow, if I had just not allowed myself to be in that victim mode, if I had not allowed myself to be in fear, maybe things would have been different. Maybe there would have been a different outcome. But you know what? I finally, after going through pretty heavy postpartum depression after my first daughter, which I very much attribute to the trauma and the victim mode and the birth itself, 42 hours later, winding up in a C-section, all these different things, I realized that I gave my power away after I started healing myself naturally in the postpartum depression, because again, I was told there's no way I'm going to be able to heal. There's no way I'm going to go back to, who I was. I need to get on this medicine. I need to do this. I need to do that. And my soul was like, no, 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 don't get on this. Don't do this. And that's, of course, not to judge or shame anyone who needed to take that path. But I had to listen to my soul. I had to truly tune in and say, okay, I haven't listened to you at all. I've been letting this ego play, this victim mode play. I got to listen to something else. There's got to be a better way to do this. And so when I decided I'm not going to get on this medication, I'm going to find holistic ways to heal myself. I'm going to find other ways to do this. And now, don't get me wrong, it was not easy and it was a much longer road. It took me about almost a year to feel like myself again. And to be honest, I don't even think myself, I think a new version of me. I feel like I let that person die and a new version of me emerged in motherhood, in this new empowerment. I joke, it's like Ali 2.0, this new version.
Yeah.
And, so they were right, at least when they said to me, you won't be able to get back to yourself. Well, no, I wasn't. I was able to let that ego self of myself die, that victim mode, all these old versions of myself, and shed them in the healing and move into a very soul-led soul space. And so, I think when I was able to see that shift of the fear, even in wanting to take the medicine that was going to help me get better immediately, and say, no, I can help myself, I can heal myself, and found meditation and found gratitude practices and found, Reiki and all these different, I've went to a shaman. I mean, I did it all. And meditation truly is what I believe saved my life. It changed my brain. It changed my mindset. It changed the way I woke up in the morning. It changed the way I would look at myself in the mirror and shame myself and say, what's wrong with you? Why is your body not bouncing back? Because society tells you that, why, can you not breastfeed easy? Why do you need a lactation consultant? I mean, the list goes on. I shame myself and judge myself for everything. And when I started doing the gratitude practices and I started meditating daily and I started doing things that were not me, but I made part of my toolkit and became a part of me, and now I can't go without. I was like, wow, all of a sudden I have faith. All of a sudden I feel empowered. All of a sudden I can breathe again and I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. And what an empowering feeling that was to take into my next births.
So empowering. Wow. I got so much goosebumps from beginning to end of what you just shared. And isn't that truly though the medicine? Taking drugs, yes, sometimes that can be life-saving. I'm not saying that doesn't have its place, but it's not the healing. The healing is going within, isn't it? And actually being aware then of that inner voice and the patterns we run and the stories that we all have. And I think that we are chronically, as women, we have a people pleaser from the get-go. We're brought up to be those good girls. That's how we have gotten validation our whole life. And to be that fierce sovereign woman, if you're a fierce sovereign girl, you probably got that knocked out of you. Maybe we have a different shift right now with conscious parenting, coming through, but that was not our generation, Sally, was it? And I think, for many, not that we are old. It sounds like we're old when I say that, we're not. But it's not long ago that I'm still, that is being practiced mostly, I would say generally of the population, is that especially if a girl has a strong voice when she's young,
time to tone it down.
You're too loud, and it, anyways, we're getting so conditioned with that. So, I mean, this is a gem that you're saying right now that I think every woman needs to hear, because even if we are trying to be the sovereign leaders of our life, we still have this so strongly from society and our families. I would say very rarely we don't have that. And so I think that this is a golden nugget that you just shared, how society and our families, their opinions and voices are so strong. And this is why you need to find these places like this podcast and other places where you have this, where you can listen to another narrative, right? If you don't want to end up with, a birth that's heavily
absolutely. And I do believe what you were saying too. There is definitely a consciousness shift happening right now where you're seeing more and more people start to, especially mothers, take their power back, want to be empowered, thank God, want to learn, want to say, no, there's got to be another way. I'm going to trust another way. I'm going to trust in my innate wisdom. All these things that we really come into this, world in and then have taken away from us, as you said. And, I think that's another thing too, is it was funny. My husband husband and I were having a conversation right before I had my son Abel, my home birth. We were having all these conversations around, how I was feeling and, everything that was coming up and everything. And I said to him, when he was talking to me about like, how do you feel about this? Because, all these things have happened. And I hadn't told my family I was having a home birth. I hadn't actually told many people at all. I had shared it with like maybe 4 people because I didn't feel safe to, unfortunately. And I also realized at the same time, not feeling safe, I also realized I was part of protecting my boundaries and protecting my sacred space. And it wasn't to harm anyone. It wasn't to upset anyone. It was truly to make sure I was in an aligned place. I could do this, mind, body, soul, everything. And I could be in my space and know that I could do this. And so my husband said to me, how do you think it's going to go afterwards when, this happens and then you have to share this and all this? And I said, oh, I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to focus on this space, my secret space, and what I'm curating and what I'm doing here. And then after everything has happened and everything is beautiful and everything is fine, which I know it will be, then I will let everyone know that he is here and this is what's happening. And the reason I bring that up is because I think also too, we don't realize how important boundaries are when the narratives get so loud, when people around us, even those who love us the most, because it's not meant to be malicious in most cases. It wasn't for me. It's just out of their fear. It's out of their programming. It's out of what they believe to be true. And they can't see past that. And they want to look at you like you're crazy in a sense, because you're going off of your intuition. You're going off of your gut. You're going off of divine. And they maybe don't sadly have that because they weren't, like you said, they didn't come in having that. Their families didn't teach them that. They were taught to go by the book. They were taught to follow the systems, to trust in the experts. The list goes on. And so when you're doing something that's radical outside of what they know, especially for me, where I was brought up very much in a home that, you trust this, you trust that. So it's like, what's wrong with you? What are you doing? Why don't you trust? Why are you not listening? And it's all their own trauma. It's their own stories. I had to create those sacred boundaries to be like, this is not about hurting someone. This is not about upsetting someone. This is not about people pleasing. This is about me and my journey and my baby and what I feel and what I need to do here. And I also realized that I had a major switch in victim mode when my husband was kind of talking to me about our stories and everything we've been through. And I corrected myself because I said to him, well, I'm not doing that again. I'm not listening to anyone and I'm not, getting into fights. I'm just keeping my space. And I said, no, excuse me, I need to correct myself. I said, I'm empowering myself. I am doing what I need to do. And I'm going to create a space that feels safe for me and you and our daughters and my baby that is coming. So we didn't know what we were having, and I said, and that's it. And I'm going to trust in my team. I'm going to trust in what I feel and what I've created this entire 9 months. And then afterwards, then I will decide how I want to take it from there. And the reason I say that and share that and corrected myself is because I realized when I was triggering, when I was going through that, I was still in victim mode. And it was very important for myself to recognize when we're healing, there are deep layers to healing. And we need to become the observer in order to notice when a program is triggering us, in order to notice when something is coming up, an old pattern is happening, and be able to correct it and see it in love and then let it go and move through it so that we can be able to step into our empowered self and embody what we've been doing all along in that healing journey and say, okay, I'm ready for the next level because I'm here, I'm embodying it, I feel it in mind, body, soul, and I'm no longer going to even subscribe to the victim mode or allow those triggers because I've healed them. I'm going to let other things come up that need to be shifted, but that part of me has been seen, has been healed, and I can move forward. And that's where I truly felt it. And I felt it was really divine that it happened like a week before giving birth, because I think that was a part of my release and a part of myself that I didn't realize I was holding that helped me get to the end.
Amazing. I love that so much. So with no further ado, let's dive on into your VBAC home birth story.
Yeah.
So share with us with your third Baba. Did you have any signs of labor approaching for you?
I did. So I had with my second daughter of that feedback, Arlie, I had prodromal labor with her. So I knew that that could happen again with this baby. And sure enough, it did. So with Arlie, it was about 3 weeks of prodromal labor. It was so intense. And I didn't kick into active labor until literally the morning of my 42-week, like hitting the nose. Like I was right there up against it. at least with Abel, my son, I was again empowered. You know better, you do better. So I got an acupuncturist to come see me. I was seeing chiropractor the entire pregnancy. I got a massage a few days before. So I think between I had sex, I think between doing the things closer to the end and being really just aware that that could happen, set my body up into place. I was doing more forward leaning positions at the end. I was doing more walking at the end. I was doing like the scoops with my hips, holding, as I'm standing here on the podcast, but you know what I'm saying? Like you scoop your hips and I'm holding, the dresser and scooping and, really just letting baby engage, really like allowing my body to do what it needed to do instead of holding and, actually letting go and trusting. And so I think that's why, my guest date, was September 8th, and he came on September 11th. And I think that the fact that it was pretty quickly after it was because I did do all those things. I think the acupuncture really, really helped, but I think that doing all those things really, helped my body see it aligned. And also, like I said, just letting go of anything that I was maybe holding on to, whether it was in my mind or my body. I really worked on just letting go, even at the end. So I had 2 false starts before I had him. So I was convinced I was in labor, and they called my husband because he was at golf and he was gone, and my daughters were home with me, and I was in the tub, and I was convinced I was in labor. My doula came over, and she's calling over to the golf course, and she's like, "Hey, he needs to come home. She's in labor." My poor husband, he comes home, I'm not in labor. And so, and my midwife comes, the whole team comes, and they're
Wow.
like, and I was really, I was breathing through, I was having deep contractions. So it seemed like that I was in active labor, and my midwife really thought so. And it wasn't until a few hours went by that things were starting to space. And she was like, do you mind if I check you? I know you don't want to be checked, but like, could I check you? And I felt like in that position, like, you know what, I trust her and things are slowing down. So I'm going to let her check me. And sure enough, she did. And she was like, yeah, there's no progress happening. Like there's no dilation. Like I'm going to say this is a false start. Like, and of course I was super discouraged. And she's like, don't be discouraged. Like that these things happen. You had drama with Arlie. Like it can happen. It can really psych you out. It can make you think that, it's real. It's okay. I just want you to rest, get in bed. She was so good about it. And so I was like, okay, so I got in bed. I rested, I went to sleep. And then the contractions all essentially went from like still going to like fully stopping, and I was able to go to sleep and get rest. Another week went by and I had another round of this, and I really was like, I'm convinced this is it. Like it was so intense. It was so tightening. Like it was really squeezing. It was really, I had experienced labor before, so I knew what labor was, And so anyways, long story short, they all come over, and, I'm breathing through. It feels even more intense this time. And she's like, okay, I want to check you if that's okay because of, the last time. But she's like, you do seem more intense this time. You see like you're moving through it even more. So I do think it is. But if you don't mind, I just would like to really see what's going on. And I wasn't ready to. And I was like, not yet. Can I just like stay in my zone? She's like, of course, continue to do what you're doing in the tub, continue to labor. And she really honored that, and I was in my.
How long had you been, like when you were doing this, these days of prodromal, what are we talking about? So had you been laboring for a while before you called them over, or how?
So I would say like probably a couple hours before I was laboring, and they were increasing. They were going from like, 10 minutes apart to 7 minutes apart to 5 minutes apart. And, even though I'm not going to the hospital, I'm still using like the tracker, to see what's going on my phone. And so they were getting, closer and closer. So I thought, for sure, hey, I could feel this, I can feel the intensity. I'm having to definitely, breathe through. I had to get in the tub, I'm walking around and they're increasing, they're building. So, and it was taking on a pattern. And so I felt like, okay, well, it's doing all these things, like this has got to be it, right? And so, nope. And so, when all that was happening, before they came over, my doula said, like, what are you at? I sent her a screenshot of my, my pattern, my contractions. She's like, okay, no, yeah, this seems like this is the real deal. Like, I'm going to come over, in 20 minutes or so and come see how you're doing. And then when she came, then she was like, she saw how I was and she saw how things were going. And she was like, yeah, no, I think, this is it. So she called my midwife and was like, Allie, I know she reached out to you. I'm here. I could see her. I believe this seems like, she's working through. She's definitely, seems to be progressing. Her contractions are picking up, So we all thought, both times that, that this was it. Now, the first time, actually, my midwife now believes it was like, I wasn't feeling the best that morning, the first time. And I had eaten like not so great food the night before. We had gone to like a country like food truck thing. I'd eaten like a ton of food that I don't normally eat. I was like, just like, you're enjoying yourself. You don't realize like you're overdoing it. And so she actually thinks like I may have had like, some kind of like not food poisoning, but like just kind of like stomach bug that like essentially like agitated things and got me going and thinking things were happening, because I went from like not feeling good like in bed to like immediately just feeling like the squeezing, and like jumped up and immediately kind of got into the adrenaline of like, oh my gosh, I'm in labor, and all these things, and I wasn't in a calm place. And she thinks it like agitated my uterus and got things like kind of false going and starting, which really can happen when you
Yeah.
essentially like get your mind going and think like this is what's
Well,
happening.
this is important information just to know. I mean, both with this is why like going out for a curry is an induction tip, right? Not that it's a real tip, but some people say like, oh, go out and have some spicy food if you want to go into labor. And some say, oh, have some castor oil. And both of them is because it irritates the bowels.
Yes,
And
exactly.
and that can then irritate the womb, which then starts that. But again, it can also do the opposite, which is false labor or prodromal labor, where you'll have maybe the feeling of contractions, but it's just that irritation that's happened and it's not actually
Right. Nothing's
contracting.
actually changing in the body, but it
Yeah.
sure feels like it, because it's actually
Oh, for sure.
contracting, like real contractions. And you're like,
Absolutely.
what do you mean nothing's happening? And not to go back to my first birth, but I think it's important since you mentioned the castor oil.
Mm,
I did take castor oil with my first birth
mm.
because I was so like, I need to make things happen. I'm overdue, quote unquote, and I think that really messed with what to your point, really
Yeah.
messed with the way my, birth went and everything. But anyways, going back to my home birth. So she believes that's what essentially irritated things, and, and everything. And so when afterwards, when we realized, it wasn't happening, I came to a place actually where I was like starting to have chills, and I was having a little bit of a fever, and we didn't expect that. And the when she was checking, baby's heart, heartbeat, like it was getting a little bit lower, and so she was like, "Okay, I'm getting a little bit, concerned. Like, are you okay?" And I was like, "No, I'm fine." And she was like, "Okay, let's get you out of the tub and like get you in your bed and get warmed up and like relax and let your body relax and like calm you." And the reason I bring this up is because when this happened, the other midwife that was with her was like, we have to, by law and by medical and everything, tell you that like, you should probably go in and, get checked. You should probably go make sure everything is okay, because, you have a bit of a fever, because, the heartbeat did go down, for a moment there, everything, everything seems fine now, but like, technically, we need to tell you these things, it's your decision, what you do, and so the reason I share this is because I think the old part of me would have gone into fear and would have said, okay, I need to go in, I need to go get checked, I need to see what's going on. And potentially something could have happened, and they could have said, induction, they could have said, who knows? And I turned to my husband and I said, I'm not going in. And he was like, okay, are you being stubborn? And I said, no. I said, I promise you, I swear to you, I am fine. Baby is fine. I can feel it in my intuition. I don't know what this was. I don't know if it was because I wasn't feeling good and then this kicked this off. I don't know if it was just a false start. Whatever it is, I know my body, I'm fine. I know baby is fine. And I need to trust in my intuition. And I need you to trust me that I'm doing the right thing. And
So
he
this
like
was
really,
so
yeah,
this was the first time.
the first start. Correct. And so he, he turned to me and he goes, okay. And I was really proud of him because he still, I would say, was traumatized from the first birth for sure. So he was, trusting me, but still also, of course, being his feelings. And he turned to my midwife and the team and he said, okay, I trust Allie. She really feels like everything's fine. Why don't you guys go home? And, we will see, I will be in touch and I will monitor her and, we'll make sure. And we had, our own like fetal, Doppler. So he's like, we'll check baby, we'll do all the things, we'll be in touch, and we'll see what happens. And they said, okay. They said, and, we kind of asked them, like, is that, is that okay? And she goes, well, if we leave and you decide this is what you want, then that's your call. We can't tell you differently. But if you say you want to, go in and this and that, then we have to, document that, go with you and everything. And I said, no, I want to stay home. I want to let things just be. So I went to sleep. He checked me. My fever went down after a few hours. Baby's heartbeat went back up and everything was fine. And I knew in my intuition, like I knew I was fine. But I remember even laying in bed that fear was starting to like come in and was starting to tell me like, oh, but are you sure? Oh, do you, want to go get checked? Oh, do you want to check the heart 100 times? And I kept telling myself, no, I know this was a false start. I know something was going on. I'm trusting. And the reason I say that is because we really do know when our intuition, good or bad, tells us something is going on. We really know. We have to lean into that. And we have to, again, ignore the noise. Not that my midwife is trying to be noise, not that my husband's trying to be noise. They're, of course, coming from a safe place, coming from a concerned place. But I really knew that I was okay. And honestly, I was almost like mad at myself that I had even called them in the first place, because I realized like, oh, it was probably because I didn't feel good. It was probably that this happened. But like, I didn't know, right? I just thought in the moment that I was in labor. And so, okay, this was good practice for me of my intuition. So then the following week, starts and kicks off again. Middle of the night, I start noticing, I'm getting more and more like really squeezing and tightening. Text my midwife. She's like, okay, put your heating pad on, get in bed. Let's just see if this moves through. This could just be prodromal again. Let's just like let it be. So I'm like, okay, crank my heating pad up. I get back in bed. I turn on like a rom-com to like try to like, relax, romantic comedy, like try to relax myself, watching something silly. And I had a little bit of magnesium to try to, relax the body further. And it's still pretty intense, still kicking up. And I'm like, okay, I don't know. Now it's like, I think 2:33 in the morning. And my husband was in the other room because he wanted to give me space, let me be in my own like dark space and just, let me be. So he's in the other room. So I get up and I start walking to the other room. And I notice as I'm walking, like it's getting more intense, getting more intense, getting more intense. And I'm like, oh, I can't really make it to the bedroom. Like, okay, this may be like real if I can't get to the other side of the house, And so I get to him and I'm like, breathing through and I'm squatting and I'm doing all these things to try to keep myself like, just somewhat comfortable. And he's like, all right, what's going on? And I'm like, I think this is it. And he's like, really? And I'm like, I do. I'm like, it feels even more intense. They feel deeper. I'm like, they're closer apart. They're 4 minutes apart now. I'm tracking them, and he, and by the way, I'm saying this as like, I'm getting a breath. Like I'm not talking like this. I'm very much like, I can feel them. Okay, this is 4 minutes, and I'm like, really, and he's like, okay, do you want me to call them? And I'm like, not yet. And so a little while goes by and I'm like, okay, yeah, actually like call them or text them. Like I feel like this is getting more intense. So I go to get in the bath because I love water and water calms me. And they kick up more in the water because that was another thing my midwife said. Kelsey was like, if it's a false start, most likely they'll start to like fizz out from getting in the shower or the bath. So they kicked up more. So I'm like, okay, they're not fizzing out. Like I feel like all signs point to go, right? So they come over. I think I want to say they came by like 3:30, 4 a.m. Like it was still in the middle of the night. And they come and, they quietly come to my house because my two girls are sleeping, and, they come in and, everyone's quiet and they come in and check me. And, she puts, Doppler on to listen to baby and she's like, okay, baby sounds good. Checks me to make sure, of course, I don't have a fever just because it's the first time, everything's good. And she's like, okay, how are you feeling? And I'm like, try to breathe through. And she's like, all right, I'm gonna let you be in the tub a little bit. I'm gonna get set up and I'll come back in a little bit and see how we're doing. So I think she really thought this time was also like really it. So she walks away and she gets herself set up. She comes back in. My doula's with me. We're breathing through. We're doing all the exercises. And she sees my contractions are getting into more intense as we're breathing through. And so, the midwife comes back in and she goes, all right, well, we all think this seems like, this is it. We're going to fill up the birth tub and, we're going to let you keep laboring and let you keep going. And so, they're filling up the birth tub. I really am like preparing myself thinking like, this is it. And she comes back in and I go on the toilet to, labor a little and to also pee. And as I get on the toilet, my doula notices like, I'm still contracting, but they don't seem all of a sudden as intense. And normally, right, everyone calls that like the throne for contractions, right? And so when it was starting to space on the toilet, it was like, that's a little, odd, but like, okay, we'll keep going. And I think that was her first sign of like something might be off here. And so then I guess she told my midwife, of course, they're not making me know this until they tell me all this afterwards. And so I'm still on, I go to the bathroom and I get up and I start, on my ball and I'm, just continuing to stay in my space. I say a prayer, I'm by my bed and I'm just like very much, in my zone. And they come in and they're like, how are you doing? And I'm like, I'm still having them, but they're a little less intense all of a sudden. Like maybe I'm getting a break for a second, which many people, as you know, get breaks. Like that's not a big deal. But obviously, because of what had happened with me, it was a little bit more like, okay, is this a break or is something happening? And of course, it was my labor was starting to stall out. And she was like, okay, let's get you laying down and relaxing. And we were doing side lying at this point on my bed to see if we could further engage the baby and further engage things to continue to go. So we did side lying for quite a bit. And she checked me and I had made a tiny bit of progress, but it wasn't anything major. And she was like, okay, I don't want to say this is not anything because you're definitely progressing, but I'm not sure if this is baby time. And, you could imagine by the second time, I'm quite discouraged. I'm like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with my body? What's wrong? Can I not do this? What's happening? Fear starts kicking in. And she's like, look, nothing's wrong. Everything's fine. And your vitals are great and levels are great. Everything's great. But like, this may just not be the time right now. Like your body may just be irritated again. I know it seems like it. We all thought it was because it was more progressing this time. But you know what? It just may not be. And so shortly after we did side lying, I did more on my ball. It all started to stall out. And so she was like, okay, we're going to leave. We're going to go, we're going to go home. We're going to rest. I want you to rest. I had a little bit of wine at this point because I needed to like chill myself out because I was really upset at this point. And she's like, and have a little bit of magnesium and get in bed, please. And, go to sleep and get rest. And so as much as I didn't want to, I got in bed. I went to sleep. I got rest. Again, contractions completely stopped at this point after a little while. And I knocked out. And I remember the next morning waking up and, they were texting me and checking on me and were like, how you doing? And I was like, I'm just discouraged. And, what's wrong with me and what's wrong with my body? And, I share this because I think it's important to share for moms that go through this or something similar. Like it's a very vulnerable place. And
it's
I was feeling
hard.
fear again, I was feeling fear again. Can I not do this? Can my body not do this? I didn't dilate fully, with my first daughter, what's going on? You go through all these things in your mind that are telling you, like you said, like, it's scary. It's this, it's that. And I felt so stuck, I felt so like, why are things not happening? It feels like things are happening, but then they stop. This is the second time. Like, how much more is this going to happen? And so luckily, I think having such a beautiful birth team and having a midwife who really was aligned with me and centered, called me and was like, do you want to talk through this? Do you want to kind of process this a little bit? And I did, and then my doula came over and was like, let's have a conversation about like, what's going on? What do you feel like is holding you? Are you holding something that you don't realize you're holding? And started really getting me into that space and was like, I want you to really start also like curating your space. Like, I want you to come into where you, believe you're going to, have this birth, where this is going to be in the home. I want you to put up whatever decorations, even if it's not going to be for another few weeks, doesn't matter. I want you to start creating this, dreaming this. That was really helpful for me. I had my husband put the twinkle lights up. We got my birth cards out. I started like looking at everything. I started visualizing like what this was going to look like, what this was going to feel like, started really attuning to that. And I think that started to shift things. That's when then my midwife was like, if you want to look into acupuncture, and we're already doing chiropractor, if you want to ramp your chiropractic sessions up, if you want to just start naturally just starting to really allow yourself to go into this space, that's what I recommend. And so I think once I was kind of given that permission, not that I needed the permission, I was able to like start to like really let go again of the mind and the fearfulness and get back into my space, start meditating, start doing breath work, start doing the things that were my practices always that I kind of let go of for a minute because I was so, in it and thinking it was all happening. And once I was able to start to do that, I noticed my body started to relax again. I started to like just let go again. And I was having fun. I said to my husband, I'm like, you know what? Like, let's go out with the kids tonight. Let's go have dinner. Let's go walk around. And I started like living again, if you will. You know what I mean? Because I was so like, this is all going to happen right now. I got to be home. I can't go anywhere. I got to stay in my space. I got to be by the tub. I had gotten myself into a fear without even realizing I was in a fear. And I thought I was like putting myself into an empowered state, but really I was holding so much because I was afraid of doing anything that like wasn't aligned with what I thought I needed to be doing to make this happen instead of just letting go. Right. And I feel like motherhood and pregnancy teaches you letting go so much on so many levels. And I was just experiencing another level of like that surrender, that letting go. And so then I had the acupuncturist come, and she came the night before I went into labor. And she came and she was doing, the acupuncture, and we had never met before. I met her through my team. And she said to me when she was, putting the, needles in me, she goes, I just am curious, like, how are you feeling? Like, mind wise, like, what are you thinking? And I was like, well, I've had 2 false starts, so it's been a little rough. I'm like, but I'm really getting to a more centered place. I'm meditating more. I'm doing my breath work. I'm letting myself just dream and know that this is going to happen. And she goes, well, if you had your choice, if you could just like wave a magic wand, would you want the baby to come like right this minute? And I was proud of myself because I said to her, last week I would have said yes and make it happen right now. I said, but now I realize after all these experiences, I have to just let go and trust and surrender and know that this baby is going to come in divine timing. This baby knows, my body knows. Doing this acupuncture will work if it's meant to. And if it doesn't, it'll just help me relax and let me get into the space of being more relaxed. Either way, it's going to help me to bring myself to this space. And she was like, wow, that's a really profound answer. And I was like, well, after 2 false starts, I realized I have to surrender deeper.
Yeah.
That conversation alone really also made me be more conscious. When you talk about earlier, when we were chatting about the consciousness shifts, like it really made me realize like, oh, okay, I'm not surrendering. I think I'm surrendering, but I'm not, And so when we had that conversation, it was a big shift for me. And then, later that night, I had sex with my husband, and I said to him, I'm like, again, if this is meant to help, then it'll help. And if not, I'm at least giving myself this time with you, this time for us to connect before this next baby comes and to just be with you. And again, we watched a movie and we joked around, we just had fun. And, sure enough, that next morning, I did indeed go into labor. But the funny thing is, when I started my contractions around 8:39 a.m., I didn't believe them because I'd been so psyched out, right? So I cranked up my heating pad as high as it could go when I went back to bed. And I got in bed and I went back to sleep. Didn't even tell my team, did nothing. I just cranked it up, drank some water, back to sleep.
The Spiritual Midwife program is for you who want to walk alongside women as they transition from maiden to mother, going through the rite of passage of birth. It's for you who long to provide a safe and sacred and physiological birth space for women and their families in every birth setting, home, birth center, or hospital. The program will weave in a feminine, organic way the ancient and modern knowledge of her story, women's wisdom, physiological, natural birth skills, as well as the art of sacred space holding. And together with this, you also get one-on-one transformational mentorship sessions with me, all in assisting you to becoming this clear channel, the best space holder that you can be for women and their families in their rite of passage of birth. You will be held and nurtured and supported in our online spiritual midwife community of your peers and me as you embody and learn the teachings, and then transition out into your community, into the world, sharing your gifts with the world. Through obviously an online portal, a learning portal rich of information, and live monthly masterclasses, Q&As, sharing and support circles, as well as the one-on-one mentoring with me, this program is unlike no other in its depth of value and immense support that you'll receive, not just through the 6 months program and mentoring, but beyond that for a whole year and longer if you wish to be a part of our community for as long as you live. You will be supported by monthly support, sharing, and debriefing circles, constantly being able to reach in for support, guidance from me and your peers in the community as you move through the amazing but also challenging work that it is to hold this space for women and their families as they journey into the birth realm, standing with her and her family at the birth altar. If you feel a yes to what I'm sharing, if you feel a calling to be this embodied space holder for birth, then put in your application and you will be invited to a discovery call with me to see if this program is truly in alignment for you.
Woke up like probably right around 10. I jumped out of bed. And I said to my husband, "Oh, I can't sleep through this. I cannot sleep through this." And he was like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, I'm fine. But like, this is so intense. This is so deep. I cannot sleep through this. And so I got up. I still was not convinced though, by the way, that I was in labor. I just was like, okay, it's just more intense. I can't lay here anymore. So I got up and I just started like walking around my kitchen to just bring movement. I started doing the scooping, as I was saying, that motion of just like scooping my body down. I started getting on our chair and doing the forward leaning inversions, over and over, and was breathing through them, but I was feeling them get way more intense as I was doing these. And I was like, whoa, like even my balance, like I can't hold myself up as quickly. Like I was noticing things were definitely shifting, but I was so convinced in my mind that like, there's no way that this could be the deal, right? Especially because I had just done all the things the night before. So it was like, I had a massage 2 days before. I went to the chiropractor days before. I did acupuncture the night before. I'm like, there's no way that like I did all these things and now like this is happening. Like it just must be getting like closer. So I convinced myself now. So I ate a little bit of yogurt and some berries, had some more water, did some more, walking around my house. And then they started to really squeeze. And I was like, I'm going to get in the tub. And he's like, okay, do you want me to call them? And I'm like, nope, I'm just going to get in the tub. And I think he could see the shift too. So he was wanting to call and he was wanting to let them know. And I was like, nope, I'm just going to get in the tub. I'm going to just let me be. You get the girls, you get the morning going. Let me just get in the tub. Because I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, 2 daughters. So obviously the house is still happening, as things are happening. And so I get in the tub. And immediately I feel like one just kick off like so strongly. So I get on, all fours in the tub and I'm breathing through and I'm doing some breath work. And I'm like, okay, I'm like, I can work through this. I can just let my body just relax. It keeps getting more intense. So I start yelling for Justin. I'm like, babe, I think you should call them. And he's like, are you sure? Are you sure? And he comes in and I asked him to get me, I had gotten the combs to hold the, to squeeze. And I was told that helps. So I was like, can you get me my combs so I can squeeze them? And he's like, okay. So he brings them in and I'm squeezing them and I'm in the tub and I'm grabbing his hands and I'm looking for him to give me some support. And he's like, are you okay? And I'm like, no, I'm okay. I'm like, but I still don't think this is it, but like, maybe you should just tell them that I'm experiencing this. And he's like, okay, what do you want me to do, Allie? And I'm like sitting here and I'm trying to tap into my intuition. And I'm like, okay, no, yeah, call them. So he calls and he puts her on speakerphone so she can hear me. And Kelsey's like, hey, Allie, how's it going? You know, and at this point, right, she's like, okay, is this the real deal? And she's like, how's it going? And I'm like, I'm not really having trouble talking to her. And she's like, okay, you're barely talking to me. So like, I'm going to come if you're telling me like this is it. And I'm like, I think so. I don't want to tell you to come, but like, my body feels really intense. I think you should come. And he's kind of reiterating this because I'm getting like every other word out at this point. I'm not getting like sentences out. And so he's like, I'd say come. So she's like, all right, let me, you know, she also is a mom. So she's like, let me get myself set up and then I'll come. So he calls my doula, Chrissy. She's also making breakfast. And she's like, okay, I'm going to make breakfast and I'm going to get my kids settled and then I'm going to come. And I remember thinking in the tub, like, oh my gosh, they're all going to take a while to come. Like, this is getting really intense. Like, I'm starting to now notice this is now like really shifting. I'm getting like louder. I'm getting deeper, like moaning. Like, you know, I'm noticing even for myself, like, oh, things are shifting. Like, this is now not feeling like it did before. This is getting more intense. So I'm squeezing my combs. I'm in the birth tub. I'm breathing through as best I can. But I'm really starting to notice like I could use some comfort measures. I could use some help. So I'm calling my husband in every time he can get away from the girls to squeeze my hips, to give me relief, you know. And so I think they arrived around, I want to say it was like 11:30 noon when my doula arrived. And I want to say my midwife came a little closer to 1, maybe 1:20-ish. So it was a little bit of time. So I was on my own for a little while, you know. And she came and she immediately started pouring, you know, hot water on my back and started, you know, giving me the hip squeezes. And she was like, I think this is it. I think baby's coming. And I'm like, do you? And she's like, yeah. She goes, you're in it. Like I could see the difference from last time. It's funny how they could really notice a difference, even though the time before, you know, we thought it was it. She could really see the change. And she was like, yeah, you're deep in it. Like this baby's coming. And I'm like, okay. And I think that was a sigh of relief, even though we didn't know for sure, you know, like, okay, if there's actually a shift, there's actually a change. And so she's giving me, you know, the hip pressure and she's just helping me move through, you know, and taking like deep breaths because I'm really feeling at this point. She was tracking them. She said they were about 3 minutes apart at this point before my midwife had arrived. So she was like, I'm going to get the birth tub going before they get here because I feel like this could happen pretty fast now. So she gets the birth tub going. My midwife arrives. She checks me now, by the way. Little backstory. Because I had been checked before and was so discouraged, we decided to play a little game with me and say, we're going to check you, but we're not going to tell you as long as everything is progressing. So she told my husband, she told my doula, she told my team, but didn't tell me, which I was good with because I think that was good for my mind not to hear anything at this point. So she said, but we're good. We're good. So you keep doing what you're doing and we're going to keep going. So I knew there was progress. So it was like, oh, thank you, God, there's progress. Now, funny story, I found out after I had the baby, I was actually at a 10 since I had dilated and gotten that quick at a 10 since 1 in the afternoon, but I hadn't had my son until 7:56 p.m. So I was dilated the entire day and evening, but I had no idea, to be quite honest. I mean, I knew my body felt like it definitely opened up and I definitely knew that things were progressing, but I did not know that I was fully there the entire day. And the reason I say that is because so many people will tell you, right, in the hospital and the medical system, like once that happens, you have to start pushing right away. You know, your body's going to immediately start feeling way more intense. I did not notice any of those things. I was just in it, laboring, allowing my body to just tell me naturally when to feel things, you know? And I would have never thought I could have been at a 10 all day until my midwife literally told me that after everything happened. You know, I was like, what? You know, I was at a 10 all day.
That's amazing. And first of all, kudos to your midwife for being a powerhouse, sovereign, independent midwife that thinks holistically and that understands that women are not linear. Because had you been in the hospital, you would not have been allowed, you know,
allowed,
to do that. And I think this is important for anyone listening because women are not linear, and truly a vaginal examination is only helpful sometimes in understanding sometimes where you're at for, you know, how can we move on here? You know, maybe you can feel through a vaginal examination, for example, if it is a very long labor, it's just he's not progressing. Maybe you can see, oh, the baby seems to be posterior, maybe, or your baby needs to, maybe we can do these position changes. It can inform you how you can help a woman, right, as a midwife. So there's a place for vaginal examinations. However, the ones that are regular to just check that you're opening according to a made up timeline from 18th, 17th, 18th century, some dude thinking that this was a good idea to do because women's bodies could be, measured and controlled, and it was like a machine. It's not. Right. We're women. Hey, if you're a woman, you're cyclical, right? You know that you are not linear.
We're methodical,
anywhere.
Right? Yeah. It's very methodical.
And nothing about us is linear. And so you can't do that. And I love that you did add this, though, because then, that's an amazing twist on your story, because obviously then you had hours, was that maybe then 6 hours or something before you had a baby, that you were fully. And so again, if you are in a hospital or in a birth center or somewhere where there's a midwife that follows these guidelines that are not evidence-based, then by 2 hours, even 1 hour, there would have been anxiety in her, or itchiness wanting to do something, or especially the hospital, you would have had doctors saying you would have to get this and this done, and instrumentals and all that. So I just want everyone to understand that that is made up. If the mama is okay and the baba is okay, there's no time limit for when you have to birth your baby.
Exactly. And that's what she said. She was like, you were great. Your levels were great. She was like, and they were extra tracking my vitals just because of the first, thing that had happened. So she was like, your vitals were fantastic the entire time. Baby's vitals were good. She was like, I had no reason to say, let's move things along. Let's do this. She's like, you were in it. Your body was doing what it needed to do. Therefore, I was just letting you there and being there to support you, and I couldn't believe that I was at a 10 the entire day. Honestly, I was shocked. I was like, it was like disbelief, because like you said, it was such a twist on my story, because I wasn't actually progressing the times before, so it was like, I went from this place of fear, right, where what's wrong with my body? I'm not going to progress. What's happening? Nothing's happening, to, oh no, Allie, you went into such fast labor that you progressed and dilated to a 10 and was there all day and didn't even know it. Like, wow, holy crap, talk about the wisdom, right? And the body. And so, anyways, going back to, in the tub and, getting, the birth tub ready and everything. And I'm just, laboring through, it was quite a while, for, the baby just was taking time and everything. And so, I got in the tub, I started feeling some pushes. So she said, okay, I'm not going to tell you when to push. I want you to really feel into when you feel it. And when you have a contraction, if it feels good, to push during that time too, but don't force yourself, just do it as you feel it. And I appreciated, one, she gave me that permission, but also two, gave me the wisdom also to know, if you feel it, just push, even if it's not a contraction, or push against a contraction. It doesn't have to be a contraction. That's another thing I feel like they tell you, you have to push during a contraction. And that's not true. And I remember even in the hospital with my VBAC with Arlie, it was every time there's a contraction, now we're going to push. But I would feel its urges, that I would want to push, back with that birth. And it was no, wait for the contraction. And so I was so grateful that when Kelsey was here, it was just push when you feel it. Period. Don't wait for anything. Don't just do it when you feel it. And that was so helpful for me. And so that's what I kept doing. As I would feel it, I would push. So I was in the birth tub. I was so grateful because the birth tub was so comforting for me. It was just a nice big cushy hot tub, it felt like. My husband was behind me with my shoulders, and kept also kind of pulling me up as I would lose strength, would kind of sink into the tub. He'd hold me up, and my midwife was on the side kind of helping pull my leg up and give me some relief that way. And my doula was pouring hot water. That was, I think, my favorite, pouring the hot water on my back. And so after quite a little while, we got me out because I hadn't peed in a while. So she was like, I really want you to try to pee. And so, I got on the toilet, I was having more contractions there, and not much pee was coming out. I was really trying and just wasn't happening. And so she got me back, out, had me do some ball exercises, had me doing some just moving around. We went outside for a minute to breathe fresh air, walked around just in my backyard, just trying to change positions, like you were saying, and also to allow me to have more of a moment to breathe and get out of like the tub and be in the zone. And she's like, we're getting really close, but like, I want to see if we can get you to pee, get some changes going, let's see what we can do. And the pee just wasn't coming. And she offered to do a catheter, but again, it was my choice. And she was like, do you want me to do it and see if that helps? How are you feeling? And I was like, honestly, I don't want to do it. And she's like, okay, that's fine. I'm not concerned. I just wanted to offer it in case it could help maybe give you some relief, because I was starting to get some pain in my back and it didn't feel like back labor. It felt like, when you get a UTI and you like feel that like that tenseness. And so I was starting to feel that, and she just didn't want me to be uncomfortable. And in my mind, I thought baby was coming a lot faster, because this was like probably like 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening. So I thought baby was coming like really, really soon, because I was really feeling it in my body. So I thought, I don't need to do it because the baby's going to be here soon. Not that I have any regrets, but if I would change anything, I probably would have done the catheter, because I didn't have him until 7:56 p.m. at night. So I went with that feeling in my back for quite a few hours. And I think that was very hard for me when it came to the labor and pushing, because I just kept remembering saying, ooh, that was like more of the pain than the actual labor, was that feeling in my back. And so they kept like really like squeezing and really trying to just like, give me like support there and pour hot water there. So I think that made it a little bit more intense for me. And I don't think I realized that.
Can I ask you, did you have to, like when you had your baby later, did you pee a lot? Did you have a lot to pee?
Like beyond. And it was funny. It was funny because after I had him and I was laying on the couch, she was like, okay, now can I catheter you? Because I really want to make sure like we get this out, because it's like really like been a while. And I was like, okay, yeah, now we can do it. Like baby's out, like placenta's out. Like, okay, yeah, okay, go ahead. And as we went to, I leaned up and I started to pee, and she's like, oh, thank God. Like, I'm so glad you're naturally peeing. And so she was like, can I help? Like, can I, push down to see if it helps? And I was like, yeah, please. Cause I would rather that than a catheter, And so she started to push down, and like what you were just saying, oh my God, it was like, not to be gross, but it was flooding. I mean, they ended up putting more under, pads underneath me than I already had, because it was so much. And she's like, well, that would be why, you were feeling that, because you had so much built up in you. I don't even think she realized how much, I had stored. I mean, I was drinking a lot of water and a lot of coconut water during the laboring, but
not peeing. Because this is another nugget, golden little nugget for everyone listening, because I mean, we're going to go back to actually hear about the continuation of your story of before you bath, but having a full bladder can also prevent the head from descending. Okay, and I just really want this to land for everybody, and I don't want everyone to be like, going to labor and being like, oh, I have to pee. It's just good to know that if you've gone 5 hours, 10 hours, that some women go like a really long time not peeing, you have a massive bladder of liters in there, which means that there's less room for baby to navigate, right? This is why we vomit, we have diarrhea, all of this before, because the body's trying to cleanse out everything so there's going to be room for baby. However, if you're drinking, which you definitely should drink in labor, you also need to pee. And this could also be maybe, I'm intrigued to listen to the rest of your story, but why potentially took a bit longer, because, if you're fully and you don't have the urge to push, that means that the head is too high. So the head needs to drop for you to get the urge to push, right? And even so, then you might drop and you get the urge, but then if you have a full bladder, your baby's trying to navigate a much smaller space.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Yeah, it's so true. And I had peed earlier on, but I don't think I realized between being in, the tub and just being in my zone that I just wasn't peeing, and then I think it was not till like later on that my midwife realized like, okay, you've had a lot of water. Now it's been a little bit of time. Now I really want you to pee. And that was when, I was getting back on the toilet, and I was just getting these tiny, I remember my doula kept moving my stomach, trying to get me to pee as I was on the toilet. And I just remember like little trickles would come out, but like nothing, substantial at all. And it just kept little trickle. So yeah, to your point, I probably should have done the catheter at that point, and like I now know that. But I didn't feel like it was going to take that much longer. I felt like my body really felt like it was shifting even further. And I thought, this is going to happen soon. so I don't need it, you know. And then it got so far along that it was like, yeah, no, we're too far gone. We can't do it anymore, you know.
Totally.
So, you know, for, like you said, anyone listening, if if there's any potential and you're cool with it, then just do it. Cause that's one thing, like, I probably should have just done. But I appreciated that she let me make the decision either way.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You know, but, and you saying that too, I'm like, oh yeah, that probably would have made things a little easier on me. So then let's see. So this was like around 4 or 5 o'clock when she was really trying to get me to pee and got me out. We took a walk out in the backyard. We did some ball, work. We did some on all fours. We just did some walking around, kind of just around my kitchen, around my bedroom, just trying to get baby to further engage because we were getting, closer and closer. And it was just like, okay, what else can we do to encourage, baby to come? So then I got back in the tub because I was starting to really feel the intensity again. And she was like, okay, if you want to get back in there for, comfort, that's fine. Again, start pushing whenever you feel it. So I went back to, pushing as I felt it, and I would just kind of, every time I, start to feel the urge, but I guess it wasn't, to your point, I guess it wasn't as deep as what I was needing to feel, but I was feeling the urge, but it just wasn't that deep feeling of what you're speaking to. So I think, I want to say it was probably around like 6-ish, maybe even 5:30, now that I'm thinking about it, somewhere in that window, she was like, you know what, like, let's start, like, actually really, like, try to focus on, like, actually, like, getting the head to engage more. Like, if you're really feeling it, I want you to, like, really bear down and, like, really try to bring, the head forward. Because, like, she was feeling me at this point and she could, I guess, feel the head at this point, but it still hadn't fully descended, to your point. So she knew baby was here, but it was like, okay, now I want you to really, like, let's, without getting anxiety and stress, like, focus on each push to really mean something at this point. So I was like, okay, now I start really, really pushing. I'm in the tub, I'm bearing down, I'm really pushing. They have, the mirror, to, like, to see, and my husband can, like, see, some hair. Shocker, all my kids had full heads of hair. And so he could see some hair, and so he's like, okay, like, we can see something, he's trying to encourage me too, and, and I'm trying to feel and, everything. And I guess at this point, they obviously, right, being the midwives and everything, they're looking for all different things. So she, I guess, had already prepared to potentially get me out of the tub because of just how slow things were going. So after a few more of that, she's like, let's get you on all fours in the tub. And they switch me and get me down, and, still same thing. And so I just remember it was pretty fast. They took me out of the tub pretty quickly. And she's like, I really just want to get you on the couch if that's okay, and get you out of water. And, like, baby's, like, right here. We need to start, like, making some moves, and so I'm like, okay. And I'm just trying to go with the flow at this point, because I'm like, okay, baby's coming, I'm just going to, like, let go of wanting to be in the tub, even though that's where I wanted to birth my baby, I'm going to just go with what, I trust. I was kind of keep reminding myself, I trust. I had them crank up my, I had worship music on, I had them crank up my worship music. And I said, I just need to stay in my space. They get me on my couch. I get on all fours, and I start really starting to feel the urge more. And she's like, okay, push. So I really give a good push. And so she's like, okay, now we really start to see the head descending. So now I guess what she did, what it's called, is like finger forceps. She asked me if it was okay if she could push down to give me and baby some room and use her fingers. So she told me that's considered like finger forceps. So she said, is that okay if I do that? And I said, yeah, that's what you need to do. Go ahead. So she starts pushing down. She's like, I want you to push. The reason I'm sharing this is because this was part of a really big part of the story. So she goes, I want you to push and put pressure against where I'm pushing down. So I guess that was like the direction she wanted me to really concentrate on the push. So she was pushing down and I was pushing against her fingers. Then as I started to do that, that's when the head really started to emerge. And then she said, okay, slow down. I want you to let it crown slowly and don't feel like you have to shove right now, like baby's here. So it's just like you said, that methodical, like, let's just take this slow. So I kind of like eased off, and then I just allowed myself to push as I was really feeling the head. So then the head was birthed. The head came, I believe she told me at 7:30. So the head had arrived, crowned. She was very happy with how, how slowly it had gone and everything. We were all obviously so excited, we could see the baby. My husband was like, the baby's here, it's the head, I can see that. It was like very exciting. And I'm, obviously so in it. And by the way, I'm on all fours, so I can feel but I can't see. So I'm this way, baby's obviously this way, and they're all looking and seeing. And so I guess she noticed immediately when she asked me for the next time I felt a push, to push, she noticed, I guess it's called turtling that he was doing. So she knew, I guess, so she was already ready. She knew something was essentially stuck. And so, without panic mode, she was ready to kind of, move me again or make something happen. So she goes, okay. She goes, I'm going to pull this leg side of you, and the other midwife's going to pull this leg of you. And we're going to kind of help you and pull your legs apart a little bit and have you push against us, because we need to kind of, move the body a little bit. So I was still in my all four position, but they wanted to basically, I guess, pull, I'm trying to explain this in the best way possible. So she wanted to pull my left leg over to the side more, and the other one to pull my other right side. It ended up being his shoulder was stuck.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing that they're doing stuff with your legs on all fours. So when a head turtles, like you said, it goes kind of retracts in, it gets really tight under the chin. It means that the shoulder is stuck. It's called shoulder dystocia.
Right. Exactly. So shoulder dystocia, which I didn't learn until honestly at 6 weeks of my birth processing when I had that. But I knew something was going on.
Exactly. And for anyone listening, that's a true emergency, right? But midwives are skilled at doing that at home, because this is one of the fears, right, that women will have, or partners maybe, when it comes to home birth, that midwives are fully skilled in what needs to be done and can see those signs, right? Like you said, you could notice that she was noticing stuff, right?
She was tuned in. Yeah.
That's it. But there was no stress, there was no fear. That's what we're trained in, we're trained to keep the physiology.
There was no anxiety, there was no changes, anything for me. I was just birthing. I was just in it. Nothing had changed. The only thing that had changed was that they had moved me out of the tub and onto the couch and wanted me on all fours, and started moving me and stretching me and, all of that. And so the reason I guess that they pulled me is because what one of the midwives ended up doing, Celesta, her partner, ended up getting underneath and getting in there and unhooking his shoulder. And so I guess
with the fingers inside
correct
the vagina.
Correct. Yeah, and so that's why they spread me more, because I guess originally when Kelsey did it, she wasn't able to get under the first time. So then the other midwife, Celesta, when they moved my legs further, she was able to get on the other side and unhook. And as soon as she unhooked, then they said, okay, give another big push. I did. They started to see the body was coming, another one, and he was out. But I was pushing, which I didn't realize, of course, right? Because I was in the zone, I was pushing for almost 3.5 hours. It's a long time to be pushing.
Yeah. And so she saw the signs of something that, and then she acted on it. And so it's so important for everyone to know that midwives can handle all the different emergencies. How that would have played out in hospital would have been that had she seen the turtling of the head, she would have pressed the emergency buzzer and the whole floor would have run in, and there would have been 10 people in that room, and there would have been a lot more hysteria, because that's how they handle things in the hospital, right?
Everything's an emergency.
Yeah, and it is a true emergency. You have to act like if that happens.
Right, but it's an emergency to your point of like the anxiety, the reaction, right, exactly. And it's like there's physiological like birth, right, with emergency, like you said, and they know what to do and how to handle it. And then there's what you said, the hospital, where it's like hit every emergency button, get everybody in here, everything has happened. And then what happens? Your body goes into fight or flight, you get in, you tense up, and everything changes, right? And so I had no idea that there was a quote unquote emergency happening. I was just birthing. I knew things had changed. I knew something was happening. So I allowed myself to go into the flow and just trust them and what they were doing. That's why I had hired them, but I didn't get into fear. I never had fear. The only thing I will say is that when his head came, and then when I knew something was going on, when he wasn't fully coming, I really started to pray and really started to just ask for support. And I said, I surrender fully. Whatever else I need to do here to let go, to let my baby come through, please help me. And between that moment of when they unhooked him and I was praying, I believe it was all divine and came together. And then, and then he came through and he was born at 7:56 p.m., and she had the little, thing to help him take a few breaths, just because he was, essentially waiting, so long to, come through. I forget what that's called, but the little thing that I don't know if it's a respirator.
Is there air or is it
air
suction? Yeah.
Just to give him a few breaths,
Yeah.
because she said like she knew that most likely he would need that, and so she did, and then once she did, and she held him and was doing that, and had me start talking to him, he immediately came around. And that's another thing too, like I guess that they tell you, like when it comes to this, which I didn't know, but I had seen in videos and from watching different people birth naturally online and everything, watching from your stories and other platforms, that happens a lot, where they tell the mom, start talking to the baby, start letting them know you're there, so they hear you, they smell you, so I was like, hi baby, I didn't even know it was a boy yet, I hadn't even seen him yet, I was still on all fours, and I was just like, couldn't believe it had happened, and I'm like, hi baby, I'm like, hi, welcome to the world, I'm here, I'm your mama, I love you, and then he started to cry, and they brought him up to me, and I was able to hold him. But it was funny when they passed him to me, I was like, I'm like, what is it? Because it's pitch black basically, and everything's like in the zone. And my husband's like, oh my God, it's a boy, because we have two girls, and my midwife didn't want to say what it was, so she wanted him to see. So it was a pretty, magical experience, regardless of, everything that had happened at the end, because like you said, like there was no anxiety, there was no fear, there was no, everything stayed, I guess she checked in with my husband, and so he was aware something was going on, and so she had let him know, I just want to let you know, if things don't change, we may have to discuss things, but like we're not there yet, but I just want to let you know what's happening, kind of thing, and so they were all aware, but I had no clue, just like when they had checked me for earlier on with the dilation, I had no idea I was at a 10 all day, and I actually, to be honest, for me and my personality, I think that actually really worked well, because it never allowed me to go to a fearful place. I never went to that fight or flight. I was able to stay in that, rest and digest and be zen and be in my space and continue the meditations I was doing and my breath work, and just be in it and trust, really trust and surrender that my baby and my body knew what it was doing, and it did, and she said, I asked her when I went to my 6-week processing, for the birth, I was like, is there anything I could have done different so that it didn't happen with him? And she's like, oh no, she goes, that happens. She goes, some babies do, some babies don't, she's like, she goes, maybe if you were to have another baby, you work a little more on the pelvic floor, you do different exercises. She's like, but that's about it. She goes, really, it's not anything. It just, that happens with the baby.
Yeah, sometimes shoulder dystocia happens, and that's why midwives are trained to do the maneuvers that needs to happen to help unhook that shoulder. And I love that this is a part of your empowering home birth story, because it didn't take away from, and this is the thing, you can have an emergency and not experience it as a traumatic experience, I think that's really important, isn't it?
It's extremely important. It's extremely important to feel empowered and to trust in your own decisions, and to also trust in your team. I was so grateful that my team was aligned the entire way through, even from the first start when I could have had to go in and get checked, what I mean? Like, instead they let me check myself at home, send them, my vitals, like, just everything was really honored. And I appreciated that so much. And I told that to her, reiterated that to her, when I went in for my 6th week, I was like, I just want to say thank you for everything. And thank you for helping me feel empowered. Thank you for keeping me in trust. Thank you for honoring, and she was like, that's what I'm here for, but she really was, the whole team. So I'm the same with my doula and everything. And I was grateful, so yeah.
So when your baby was born and she gave the baby just some breaths, was the cord still attached?
Yes, the cord was still attached. I had told her I wanted it to be as delayed as possible. So they did. They were wonderful. It was about a half an hour actually that I was laying and we were still attached. And then Justin, my husband, cut the cord.
Beautiful. Because I think this is also really important for everyone to understand that she could do that next to you. She did not have to cut and clamp that cord, take the baby away somewhere to a resuscitation table, in the room, or even in some places, especially here in Sweden, most resuscitation tables are outside in a different room, right, which is separating mom and baby. So here again, like, there was no interference with the physiology.
Nope.
Like you felt safe. She cared for the baby next to you. Your baby was connected to you. And like you said, like she said, talk to your baby. And that's because they hear you, you know, both you and
Yeah.
your husband. That baby has heard you throughout the whole pregnancy. And so that's like a calling in, isn't it? Calling earth side, speaking to the baby.
Yeah. And it was amazing. I mean, as soon as that, you know, I was like, hi, baby, I love you. You're here. You're Earth side. We're so excited to meet you. Like immediately it was like, you know, took a few breaths on their own and started crying, you know, and then as soon as, he got to my, chest, immediately was just, started turning super pink, and rosy. And it was so sweet, and then, when I was laying, when they got me to lay down and, he was laying on my chest and, immediately put him, on my boob and was, trying to suck. I mean, just immediately just started, coming around. It's amazing how they do that, like you said, like from everything that's gone on, but again, it's just trusting in that physiological and, everything that's happening, so I was grateful too, that I was in a place to really trust. I didn't have any moments of my own anxiety, not even with when he was, when essentially stuck, not even when, at the end, that when she gave him the breaths, like none of it. I was so trusting and just in that trust, in that surrender, in that empowered place of like, I know that everything is fine. I trust everything is fine. And I think that was also a big thing, because I think that when you come out right of that and you go into the victim mode, you go into fear, things can shift very quickly. Things can change that wouldn't have supposed to happen because you go into fight or flight, because the body tenses up, because, you go back to what could happen, what's happening. And I believe personally, our thoughts are very, very powerful. They can manifest good or bad. And so when you can really be in the mindset of like, I trust and I really trust and I surrender and I'm allowing, there's a big shift, and that empowerment really kicks in, and you're able to be really able to be an observer and be in it, but also be like, okay, I'm going to allow this, like I think back to when they took me out of the tub. And I think if that had happened, maybe, earlier on in my journey of my own healing and everything, I would have said, no, I want to stay in here. No, I trusted that I wasn't supposed to be in there anymore, and I needed to get out and I needed to change my position. And you know what I mean? And so I think that's why also too, having, like you said, a midwife who really aligns with you, really making that clear and making sure when you interview and you meet and you decide, we're very aligned. I mean, I know I can trust this person. I know they know where I'm at. They know how I feel, and knowing that, because that's so important to be able to advocate for yourself, especially in a space when maybe like for me, I wasn't really able to fully advocate at the end because I was very much in the pushing, right? I was very much in the experience. So she knew what I wanted, and wanted to honor that fully as much as she possibly could, as long as I was safe and baby was safe.
That's it. And that's the thing, if you trust fully your birth team, then you can fully surrender in birth and know that if they do say something, it's because of a reason, right?
Yes.
You don't have to second guess, because you know this person inside out, and you know that they have your best interest at heart, and they know you.
Yeah. And like you said, you can actually let go on a deeper level and actually surrender. And that's what I've learned in all my journeys of, pregnancy and birth. That's what it's all about. That deep trust and surrender is where the magic happens. It's where the birth actually happens. It's where this, baby comes earthside, because you are allowing, again, this beautiful portal, this beautiful vortex to actually happen, So yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you.
I love that. So if you had a first-time mama in front of you right now who's about to have her first baby, and she really wants to have a natural and empowering birth experience, what advice and pearls of wisdom would you give to her?
Oh, well, I mean, I think we just said the trust and surrender, like truly, it sounds so simple, but it's so much deeper than you realize.
Oh, yeah.
Do the mind work. Do the soul work, like whatever it is. If you have any trauma in your life, regardless from a birth or not, if you're a new mom, obviously you've never had birth before, anything you have that you're holding on to from family, from a relationship, from whatever, maybe we all have trauma in our lives. It's just a fact. Heal yourself with that trauma in the best way that you can, so that you can be in a place to truly trust, to truly let go, to know your own intuition, to be able to tap into that wisdom that we all have, and be able to just melt into it and say, yes, I know my soul. Yes, I know what I feel. I know what this baby needs. I know what I need. So you're not triggered. So you're not coming from a place of fight or flight. You're not coming from, basically, as a breathwork facilitator, I'll say, a trauma response, a place where, you're literally, reacting from a non-rest and digest system. Your parasympathetic nervous system wants to be in a rest and digest state. And we all go into fight or flight. We all go into anxiety. But when you are pregnant and giving birth, that is the last place you want to be. You need to be able to get centered, be in your mind, body, soul, know it is truly all connected, and say, okay, I trust in my body. I trust in my baby. I trust in myself, and align yourself to be able to go into that in that mindset. Because I think that even for me, I didn't realize my first daughter, like, I joked myself doing the hypnobirthing. I did it, but I barely did it. This time around, it was my third baby and I knew what I was doing. I was like, I'm not playing around. I took a pain-free birth course. I had Christian hypnobirthing. I mean, I had all the tools on top of my own meditation, my own breath work, everything that I was already doing, and was like, I am going to set myself up for as much success as possible. And I'm going to dive in and study this like a course that's like for, when you were taught in school to do well. Like, I was like, I'm going to make sure I'm fully aligned, and my body trusts, my mind trusts, my soul trusts, because that, I feel like, is a huge piece for any new mama who's like, I really, really want this. Get yourself set up.
Yeah.
Make sure that you're aligned. And then at the end, trust and surrender, because that's where I feel like we don't switch. For me, I didn't either. In the beginning, it was like, I have to control this. I have to control this. No.
Mm-hmm.
Control does not work in birth. Control does not work in pregnancy. You have to trust and let go. So the more you can trust and let go, once you've aligned yourself to be able to do so, and you can truly connect your intuition and not listen to anything else, and know, you're good to go. And unless something, like you said, switches or changes where something needs to intervene and you need that advice, trust that trust in your baby, and you will have a beautiful birth.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Ali. I just word on everything you said, for sure. It's been a pleasure having you on. Thank you for coming and sharing.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun to get to recap this with you. And thank you for sharing, your words of wisdom too, with even the things that happened in my birth, because it even opens my eyes even further.
Yeah, beautiful. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening. If you love this podcast, then please consider sharing it, leave a review, or make a contribution on our Patreon page. And if you want to connect on social media, then find the podcast on Instagram as The Natural Birth Podcast. Thank you for listening.